deep within the vast expanse of the Namibian wilderness, where endless stretches of golden sand dunes meet scattered patches of thorny acacia woodland, a female leopard had established her temporary den beneath a cluster of dense bushes that provided crucial protection from both the scorching desert sun and the numerous predators that roamed this unforgiving landscape. This magnificent spotted cat, her coat bearing the distinctive rosette patterns that marked her as one of Africa's most elusive and formidable hunters, had recently given birth to a litter of 3 precious cubs that represented the continuation of her genetic lineage in one of the world's most challenging environments. The mother leopard, weighing approximately 65 kilograms and measuring nearly 2 meters from nose to tail, was an experienced matriarch who had successfully raised several previous litters during her 8 years of life in the harsh Namibian terrain. Her powerful muscles, honed by years of climbing rocky outcroppings and pursuing swift prey across the desert floor, allowed her to hunt effectively in an environment where food sources were scarce and competition from other predators was fierce. Her amber eyes, constantly scanning the horizon for potential threats, reflected the perpetual vigilance required for survival in this remote corner of southern Africa. The 3 cubs, now approximately 4 weeks old and still completely dependent on their mother's milk for survival, had begun to develop the basic motor skills and sensory awareness that would eventually enable them to become independent hunters. Their soft, fluffy coats bore the same spotted patterns as their mother, though these markings would not reach full definition until they reached several months of age. 2 of the cubs appeared to be developing normally, displaying the robust health and energetic behavior typical of young leopards, with clear eyes, steady breathing, and an eagerness to explore their immediate surroundings under their mother's watchful supervision. However, the 3rd cub presented a troubling contrast to its healthy siblings. This smallest member of the litter exhibited numerous signs of compromised health that had become increasingly apparent as the days passed. Its breathing was labored and accompanied by frequent episodes of violent sneezing that seemed to exhaust the tiny creature's limited energy reserves. The cub's movements were noticeably slower and less coordinated than those of its brothers, and it often struggled to keep pace when the family needed to relocate their den to avoid detection by hyenas, wild dogs, or other threats that pose constant dangers to vulnerable young leopards. The mother leopard's maternal instincts were torn between her natural desire to protect and nurture her weakest offspring and the harsh reality that survival in the Namibian wilderness demanded constant mobility and alertness. The delays caused by the sick cub's inability to travel at normal speed put the entire family at risk of discovery by predators who would not hesitate to kill both the cubs and their mother if given the opportunity. The female leopard's decision-making process was further complicated by her own need to hunt regularly in order to maintain the strength necessary for milk production and den defense. During one particularly urgent relocation, necessitated by the approach of a pack of spotted hyenas whose territorial calls had been growing closer throughout the night, the family was forced to abandon their secure hiding place and seek new shelter several kilometers away. The 2 healthy cubs managed to follow their mother's swift pace through the thorny undergrowth, their natural agility and stamina allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain despite their young age. However, the weakest cub quickly fell behind, its labored breathing and compromised physical condition making it impossible to maintain the necessary speed for the journey. Despite its desperate attempts to catch up with its departing family, the sick cub's strength failed completely after only a few hundred meters of travel. The small creature collapsed beside a patch of dried grass, its tiny chest heaving with the effort of trying to draw sufficient oxygen through its severely compromised nasal passages. The mother leopard, faced with the agonizing choice between protecting her 2 healthy offspring and remaining with her weakest cub, made the decision that ensured the survival of the majority of her litter and continued onward to establish a new den site. The abandoned cub lay motionless in its exposed position throughout the remainder of the day, its condition deteriorating rapidly as dehydration and exhaustion took their toll on its already fragile system. The blazing desert sun beat down mercilessly on its small form, while the approaching night promised temperatures that would drop to levels potentially fatal for a creature so young and vulnerable. Ironically, the cub's obvious weakness may have saved its life temporarily, as a pack of hyenas that passed nearby dismissed it as already dead and not worth the effort of investigation. As dawn broke over the Namibian landscape, painting the endless dunes in shades of gold and crimson, the cub somehow managed to rouse itself from its state of near unconsciousness and began a desperate search for water and shelter, driven by survival instincts that operated below the level of conscious thought. The small leopard followed faint scent trails and distant sounds that led it away from the wild interior of the reserve and toward the edges of human habitation, where domestic animals and agricultural activities created different opportunities for survival. The farm belonging to Hendrik van der Merwe occupied a strategic position at the boundary between the protected wilderness area and the developed agricultural region that supplied much of Namibia's domestic food production. Hendrik, a third-generation cattle rancher whose family had worked this land for over 70 years, had built his operation around a careful balance between productive farming and respectful coexistence with the wildlife that regularly moved through his property during seasonal migrations and feeding cycles. On this particular morning, as the first light of dawn illuminated the weathered buildings and sturdy fence lines that defined his homestead, Hendrik was conducting his usual inspection of the livestock facilities when an unexpected discovery stopped him in his tracks. Hidden behind a large pile of hay bales that had been stacked near the main barn, a small, furry creature lay curled in what appeared to be a final state of exhaustion and illness. Hendrik's initial assumption that he had encountered a domestic cat or small wild feline was quickly dispelled as he moved closer and observed the distinctive spotted pattern and facial structure that could only belong to a leopard cub. The sight of such a young and obviously endangered wild animal on his property filled him with a complex mixture of wonder, concern, and immediate responsibility for its welfare. The cub showed no fear or aggression at his approach, suggesting that its condition had progressed beyond the point where normal defensive behaviors could be maintained. The most alarming aspect of the cub's appearance was the severe swelling and discharge affecting its nasal area. One side of its small black nose was grotesquely enlarged with a continuous flow of thick, yellowish mucus that carried a nauseating odor indicative of serious infection or parasitic infestation. The cub's breathing was labored and accompanied by frequent episodes of violent sneezing that seemed to provide no relief from its obvious distress. Recognizing that this situation required immediate professional intervention, Hendrik contacted the Regional Wildlife Management Office to request emergency assistance, while his wife Elizabeth began providing basic comfort measures for the suffering animal. They carefully moved the cub to a secure enclosure that had previously housed goats, ensuring that it would be protected from potential trampling by curious cattle, while remaining easily accessible for the wildlife specialists who would soon arrive to assess its condition. Elizabeth's natural compassion and practical experience with animal husbandry led her to offer the cub small amounts of diluted milk and warm water, which it accepted gratefully despite its overall weakness. The couple took turns monitoring the small patient throughout the day, noting with growing concern that its breathing difficulties appeared to be worsening as the hours passed. The response team from the Namibian Wildlife Service arrived within several hours of Hendrik's initial call, bringing with them the specialized equipment and expertise necessary to evaluate and treat serious medical conditions in wild animals. Chief Ranger Paul Eckstein, a veteran conservationist with over 20 years of experience in wildlife management and veterinary care, was accompanied by his younger colleague Noah Chiweza, whose recent training in wildlife emergency medicine made him an invaluable addition to the rescue operation. Paul's examination of the cub revealed the severity of its condition. and confirmed his suspicions that they were dealing with a potentially life-threatening parasitic infection that required immediate surgical intervention. The specialized medical equipment available at the regional wildlife clinic would be necessary to properly diagnose and treat the infestation that was clearly compromising the cub's ability to breathe and maintain basic life functions. The transportation of the critically ill cub to the wildlife medical facility required careful attention to maintaining its fragile condition during the journey. Noah prepared a specially designed transport container equipped with supplemental oxygen delivery and temperature control systems that would provide the best possible environment for the 9-kilometer trip to the clinic. The cub was wrapped in soft towels to prevent stress from excessive light and movement, while continuous monitoring ensured that any changes in its condition could be addressed immediately. Dr. Linda Swampel, the chief veterinarian for the Regional Wildlife Management Program, had been alerted to the incoming emergency and was fully prepared to begin treatment upon the cub's arrival at the clinic. Her preliminary examination confirmed the presence of a severe nasal myiasis, a condition caused by the infestation of fly larvae that had taken up residence in the cub's nasal passages and surrounding tissue. This type of parasitic infection, while treatable if caught early, could quickly become fatal if the larvae were allowed to continue their destructive feeding and reproduction cycle. The surgical removal of the parasitic larvae required extreme precision and patience, as each individual maggot had to be carefully extracted without causing additional damage to the already inflamed and infected tissue. Using specialized endoscopic equipment that allowed her to visualize the interior of the nasal cavity, Dr. Swampel systematically removed dozens of white, segmented larvae that had been feeding on the cub's living tissue and causing the severe respiratory distress that had nearly cost the animal its life. The extraction procedure took nearly 2 hours to complete, as some of the more deeply embedded larvae required careful dissection to remove without leaving behind fragments that could cause continued infection. Once all visible parasites had been eliminated, the nasal passages were thoroughly irrigated with antibiotic solutions and anti-inflammatory medications to promote healing and prevent secondary bacterial infections that commonly followed this type of parasitic assault. Following the successful completion of the surgical intervention, the cub was placed in an intensive care environment where its recovery could be monitored continuously through remote video surveillance and regular physical examinations. Dr. Swampel chose the Moya, which translates to breath in the local Oshiwambo language, as a tribute to the cub's struggle to overcome the respiratory crisis that had brought it so close to death. The recovery process required several weeks of careful nursing care, including hand feeding with specially formulated milk replacer, daily wound cleaning and medication, and gradual reintroduction to normal activities as the cub's strength returned. Noah took primary responsibility for socializing with Moya during this period, helping the young leopard maintain its natural awareness of humans while building sufficient trust to allow necessary medical treatments. The transformation in Moya's condition over the following weeks was remarkable to witness. The constant sneezing and labored breathing that had characterized its arrival at the clinic gradually subsided as the inflammation in its nasal passages decreased and normal respiratory function was restored. The cub's appetite returned with vigor, and it began to display the playful behaviors and alert curiosity that were hallmarks of healthy young leopards. By the end of the 3rd week of treatment, Moya had gained significant weight and demonstrated all the physical capabilities expected of a leopard cub its age. Dr. Swampel's final health assessment confirmed that the infection had been completely eliminated and that the cub's immune system had returned to normal function, making it a suitable candidate for release back into its natural habitat. The decision to attempt reunification with Moya's biological family required careful planning and coordination with field researchers who had been monitoring leopard populations in the area where the cub had originally been found. Camera traps and tracking data indicated that a female leopard with 2 cubs had been observed in the vicinity, suggesting that Moya's mother and siblings were still alive and operating within their traditional territory. The reintroduction expedition required a full day of hiking through challenging terrain, with Moya transported in a specially designed carrier that allowed it to remain calm and comfortable during the journey. The team followed GPS coordinates and animal tracking data to locate the area where the leopard family had last been observed, hoping to find them still in residence and willing to accept the return of their missing member. The moment of truth arrived when the distinctive calls of leopards were heard in the distance, leading the team to a secluded grove where the mother leopard and her 2 surviving cubs were resting in the shade of a large camel thorn tree. The reunion between Moya and its family was an emotional scene that validated all the effort and resources that had been invested in its rescue and rehabilitation. The mother leopard's immediate recognition and acceptance of her lost offspring demonstrated the powerful bonds that exist within leopard families, even after extended separations. The careful grooming and protective positioning that she exhibited toward Moya indicated that the cub would be fully reintegrated into the family structure and benefit from the continued guidance and protection necessary for its survival to adulthood. The success of Moya's rescue and rehabilitation became a celebrated case study within the conservation community, demonstrating the effectiveness of coordinated responses between private landowners, wildlife management agencies, and veterinary specialists in addressing wildlife emergencies. The story also highlighted the importance of maintaining corridors of cooperation between agricultural operations and protected wilderness areas, ensuring that animals in crisis can receive the help they need regardless of where they are found. The long-term monitoring of Moya's progress through GPS tracking confirmed that the cub successfully adapted to life in the wild and continued to thrive under its mother's care. The survival of this individual leopard represented not only a personal victory for all those involved in its rescue, but also a meaningful contribution to the conservation of a species that faces mounting pressures from habitat loss and human encroachment throughout its African range.